I'm gonna go over how to get started making this tree-themed ornament. You can use it for hanging in front of a window, use it as part of a package decoration, anything like that. It's very straightforward to make, and you only need a few basic materials. So let's get started. The first thing that we're going to need is the double-pointed needles to make the frame of this. So I've got a set of bamboo double-pointed needles. These are 2.5 millimeter, but the exact size isn't going to matter all that much. We want to lay those out in a square shape. And the first thing we're going to do is secure the corners. So we're just going to use some yarn. I'm using the same yarn that I will be doing the rest of this project in. And I'm just going to cut about 6 to 10 inch lengths of that yarn, one for each of the corners that I'm going to be working in. And so I'm just going to cut those really basic. I haven't measured any of the lengths of these things, just long enough that you can tie them and work with them easily. And now we want to have the corners themselves overlapping by about an inch, just shy of an inch. And we are just going to tie these in place. And so you can wrap them around one direction, wrap them around the other direction, bring them up and tie them off. And I'm just doing an overhand knot here. You do not have to use the full length of the yarn that you cut, but I do find it much, much easier to tie things off if you have a little bit of extra yarn, and then you can always trim it shorter. Much harder to tie the knot if you leave that super short to begin with. So do that, and then I just clip, just leaving about an inch tied there. So that's my first corner. I'm just going to do the identical thing on my other corners. Now that we have secured the corners of our frame to get started, we are ready to start wrapping the frame. So you can see on the finished piece here, we've covered the bamboo shafts of our double-pointed needles with the same yarn that we're creating the trees with. I think this just gives it a nicer finished look, and it also helps secure those corners as well. So to do this, we are going to use the same yarn that we're using for the rest of it. We are going to take about a 10-foot section. So for me, I just grab it and take like a full arm's length, fingertip to fingertip for me, and then do the same thing a second time. And then I go ahead and cut it. That's going to give me about a 10-foot length of yarn. Once you've got that length of yarn, you want to fold it in half so that you're starting at the middle, about the midpoint. So you're about 5.5 feet in to your yarn here. And what we're going to do is we are going to start at one of the corners. Doesn't matter which one because they're exactly the same. We're just going to start at that midpoint with the fold in our yarn. And we are going to tie just a basic overhand knot, just like we've done for the corners with that, to secure it onto the first corner here. Pull that nice and tight. You can do a double knot so that it's even more secure if you'd like to, but we are just fastening that on. Now, the reason that we started in the middle is because dealing with the full length of the 10 feet of yarn to wrap it all the way around is going to be challenging to pull that whole thing through. So what I like to do is I like to gather up one half of it and just tie it loosely so it's in a little bundle and out of the way. And then I am just going to wrap the other remaining half. I'm going to wrap it around. I like to pull that through every time so that it doesn't kind of get all extra tangly. But I like to go around those corners extra well and make sure I'm pulling very snugly around those corners so that they're just very, very firm. And then I like to hide the little tails when I tied on the corners, so I make sure that tail is covering the shaft of the needle that I'm about to wrap it around. And then I'm truly just, whoops, and you'll see, this is why, to give it some extra security, it's good to wrap it again, because sometimes those just pop out. They're not super secured until we wrap them again. But you are truly just wrapping around and around and around. There's nothing else to this. There is no knot tying. You are just wrapping. And you wrap over and over until you get to the corner, and then you secure the next corner in the same way. You probably want to think about taking this tail and holding it down there as you're wrapping so that that is covered as well. And it takes a little bit of time, but it is not a complicated thing to do at all. And just keep pulling that through. So you can see how that is, looks nice and neat and tidy. We're just going to do that all the way around. Once you get to the halfway point with wrapping, you started here, you've wrapped here, you double wrapped this corner, you get all the way to this part. You can wrap this one a few times around to start securing this edge, and then just leave it hanging here. And we are going to come over and start on this side again, and we're going to do that exact same thing over to here. Once we've gotten all the way around so that both of our long pieces meet at the top again here, you are going to go ahead and wrap an extra few times around, and then give it a double knot right at the top with your two ends. Again, pull nice and tight so everything's nice and secure. Give it another tie. And then we will be turning these long strands into our hangers at the end. But I prefer to leave them long at the beginning, because if I like to work from a hanging piece, I like to leave these long enough so that I can just tie it and hang it from something without needing to worry about how long my string is. So we're just going to leave those long until the end. You might have noticed I forgot to start wrapping right at the beginning of my little the little strands that I tied the corners with. So I'm just going to take a pair of snips and snip off those extras, just so that it looks all neat and tidy. And now we are ready to cut our yarn strands to start attaching for our trees. Now that we have our frame made and wrapped and all the corners secure, now it's time to actually start making the tree. So the first thing we need to do is cut our lengths of yarn. For the example one, I cut 15 lengths of yarn, each about 5.5 feet long. Like I said, again, it's just between my two, like, arm's length. And you are going to fold them in half in the same way that we did before we started wrapping. So I've cut my 15 lengths here, and then I'm just going to fold them in half. And I really like the look of one of the trees is predominantly green and one of the trees is predominantly purple in this sample. And that is all done with just this yarn. And so what I did to make that happen was we are going to be attaching them at the midpoint when we attach the branches. So what I did is I looked at the halfway point of all of these, and I picked out, for my sample, I picked out 5 that were purple in the middle, and then there were 9 that were green in the middle, or near the middle. Some of the purple ones, you're going to have to divide them a little bit so that's not exactly in the middle, but you can get near the middle. If your variegated yarn, you can of course use just 2 different yarns if you wanted to, or you can sort of engineer it. You can kind of fold your yarn in half at the point of one color, and then make sure that it's not that color for the other one. But I kind of just do it randomly, and it kind of works out about like this. There's more green in this yarn than purple, so it kind of works out with some more greens, some less purples. And now I am just going to start, and you'll have a diagram that gives you this information as well. But you're just going to start attaching the pieces where they're going to go. There are a couple that actually originate from tree branches that don't exist yet. So like this purple one is attached here. We can't attach that one until we've created this branch, but we're going to attach all the ones that go on the sides now. So I just start on one side and work my way around. I'm going to start here with the purple one. So I'm going to take my pile that has the purple as the center. I'm going to make sure I kind of fold it where the purple starts, so it doesn't have to be exactly in the middle. So you see it's green here and purple here, so this is kind of where it changes from green to purple. That is where I am going to attach it on here. And so I'm going to kind of attach it down just about an inch, maybe a little bit less from the corner on this bottom one. Do make sure that you know which way the hanger is going to be so that your trees aren't upside down. And we are just going to lay that yarn underneath the side of the frame. So lay that loop where we folded it in approximately half. And we are going to pull the tails of that yarn through the loop. So this is called a lark's head knot, and it's a very common knot for attaching strands in macrame. So we've got that one attached there. I'm going to do another purple one about an inch up on the other side. So I'm grabbing another from my purple pile, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to fold it so that the purple, my fold is right about where the purple and the green meet each other. And I'm going to attach this one in the same kind of way. Pull those two tails through, and this one is too far from the corner, so I'm just going to budge it over there just a little bit more. And I like to push it until those two, the two halves of the lark's head knot are smushed together like that. And those are the first two tree limbs there. So I'm going to go ahead and finish attaching all of the limbs that are attached to the frame according to the chart, or this is a very easy thing to choose yourself. You do not have to follow the diagram. It's all going to work exactly the same. You are going to keep a couple back that are going to be attached to the other tree limbs, so we won't attach those right now. Now that we have all of the branches attached that are going to be attached to the frame, now it's time to actually start creating branches. So again, you can do this in whatever way you would like to, or there is a copy that has the layout of how I did mine in terms of how many knots you're putting on each branch before it then joins the next one. But if we're starting on this corner, the diagram is telling me I have done 6 knots for this section of the branch, 8 knots for this section of the branch, and then I join them together and I do 12 knots before I'm going to be ready to connect it to something else. So let me show you how we do the individual branch knots, and then when we're going to join together, I'll do that one. So we are going to start with our first branch, and because I want this branch to be purple and one side of my yarn is purple and the other side is green, the purple one is going to be the active yarn that I'm working with to tie the knots, and the green is going to be kind of the filler inside, so you will not see the green. And so all we're going to do is I'm going to take the purple, I'm going to create a loop, I'm going to go around that green, pull the purple tail all the way through. So I've just tied an overhand knot, but I'm going to hold some tension on that green so that when I pull it tight, the green stays straight and the purple is the one that wraps around that green. So when I do another one, I'm going to do 6 total. That was my first one. I do my second one and I just tie an overhand knot, and then I'm holding the one that I want to be on the inside. I'm holding that straight while I pull the other one. So that's 2. And once you get going with this, they go pretty quickly. 3, and you don't want to pull as tight as humanly possible, but you don't want to see tons of that inside yarn color coming forward or being visible in there. 4. 5. 6. And you can see, as I've got several knots on there, if you're not happy, if there's some of the filler cord peeking out, so you can see that there, you can just tighten that up just a little bit so that that goes away. Just kind of push everything up and give it a little tug. You will also notice as you're doing this, those knots don't want to stay. There's a portion of it that has a little bump on it. That bump doesn't want to stay all on one side. It wants to spiral around. So the bump starts up here and it goes around the back. And now we're starting to get that spiral here. That spiral is natural, and that is going to happen as you're working. So you can see the spiral branches go through it. I actually think it kind of adds to the look. You can see it really clearly on here, that spiral that goes around and around and around. I think that makes it look more like a tree. So don't fight it. It's going to happen. Just let it do its thing. So that one was 6. This one here is going to be 8. I'll go ahead and do that, and then we'll connect them together. Okay, so I have now finished the first 2 branches. I did 6 knots on this side, 8 knots on this side. Now my pattern is telling me that I want to combine these together to create a thicker branch. And the pattern is telling me to do 12 knots. Again, this is very much a choose your own adventure. You can follow the directions as closely or not at all as you want to. But to combine branches together, all we're going to do is we need to select which one of these we want to be our main yarn that we're working with. So for it to stay that purple color, we are going to select the one of the strands that is purple, and then the 3 strands are all 3 going to stay in the center here this time. And then we're doing that exact same thing. We're just tying an overhand knot. We are holding the 3 center strands tight. Those are going to be held still. And then the working yarn, the yarn that you're actually physically going to see, gets snugged up here. With that first one, you kind of want to tug and pull on everything. Make sure you like the way that join looks, where the 2 come together. And then you're just going to keep tying those knots. Pull all the way through and tie it. So that is how you join branches together. And then you'll just tie the 12, and then you will need... You'll be at this point now. You can't join this until you've created more of them. So I like to work across to kind of get the first round of joins in all the way around, so I can start to see things start to take shape a little bit before I then go ahead and join the next round of joins through. When you're attaching a tree branch to a tree branch instead of to our frame, you attach that yarn in the exact same way that we attached it to our frame. So you're just going to fold your yarn in half, and you're going to tie a lark's head, in this case right in the crook of this branch. So I created these 2 branches, I joined them together, and then when I was finished with that, that is when I joined that next branch to there. Now that we have gotten our all of one tree finished, so I've gone ahead and completed just the purple tree. I will go back through and do the green tree after I've showed you how we attach the bottom of the tree to create the look of the roots and where it's going to be joining on to the earth here. So again, following the written pattern that includes the exact numbers is what I'm going to be showing here, but any number that you want to use for stitches, as long as it will physically connect, it's going to be the right thing. So for this one, instead of joining on and connecting together like we've done where we're joining the two branches together at these various points, we are going to be splitting apart. So here we have all of the strands from one tree trunk are all together coming out of that tree trunk. And what the pattern is telling us to do is we are going to separate 3 of those. So we're going to have the first sort of set of roots comes off here. So I just pull off 3 strands. And I look for the one, I want this to be purple, so I look for the strand that is purple. And so when you're selecting the 3, make sure one of those 3 is a purple one. And we are going to, just as we have done before, we are going to use that as our working strand, and the other 2 parts of that set of 3 as the core, the part that you can't see, but that you are still using. And so I'm going to do 4 knots just around with using these 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that creates that first part of the root that just comes off of the edge of the tree. And now for this one, we want to do, using all of the remaining cords that are attached to that, we want to do 7 stitches here. But if you look at my yarn that I have, there's none that have a lot of purple on it. And so what I'm actually going to do is I am going to go to the other end of the ones for my green tree, because you will have more yarn here than you need. I'm going to go here. A lot of these have a nice long length of purple at the end here. So what I'm actually going to do is find the one of these where the purple goes up the highest. Looks like about here is what we want. And I'm going to trace that up to where it turns into green, and then leave even just an extra inch or 2 above that. And so now I have a length of purple that has some green up at the top. So what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to tie this on to one of the cords that is already connected there. I'm just going to tie the one that has more purple in with it. Gonna do just an overhand knot and cinch that right up at the tippy top there. Just make sure you pull it nice and tight. And now when we start doing our knots, I'm going to be using this new purple string that I just tied on, and the overhand knot that I used to secure it is going to be gone over again with itself, so you're not going to be able to see it, and it's going to make it extra sturdy. And you can do that at any point. If you run out of purple up here at any other point in the tree, you can do that exact same thing. If you prefer to use 2 different colors of yarn, this obviously is not going to be an issue. But I really like the look of the sort of all of the variegates kind of mixing together. I just like the way that looks. I think they all work really nicely together. So now I'm using my new purple yarn. That first knot we do, make sure you get that all the way up to where the split is, and leave that kind of loose so that it kind of covers up and overlaps that join just a little bit. And when we're going around all of these, we are doing 7 knots to make it exactly like the sample. 3, and you can kind of twist that, encourage it to twist around to the back to, again, just hide that joint a little bit. And I like, as I get farther towards the bottom, to make my knots get a little bit looser. That way the tree trunk seems to get wider at the bottom. It's got the same number of strands in there. You're tying it more loosely, so it looks like that trunk gets just a little bit wider at the bottom. And of course, because I was talking, I lost count of how many of these I was doing. The exact number is not important. As long as you're physically able to get those roots down to where the tree trunk is going to connect, it's long enough. You've done the right number. So you can see here, we've got the smaller, the 3-strand root comes out and ties on there. And then the chunkier root, the 7-strand root here, kind of splits again into another set of 3, and then it kind of disappears behind the other one on that one. So you're going to do that same sort of thing again. You are going to divide 3, and you can see on this one, I ran out of purple as you got right to the very, very bottom, and because that root is hiding back there and down here, I didn't worry about making them purple, but you can tie on another purple one if you'd like to. But you're going to complete that in the same way that we did our other ones and create another set of 3 and then another set of either 3 or 4. I do recommend that you create all of the trees and all of the roots before you're attaching them on, just because having them overlap and intertwine with each other, I think is part of the charm of this piece. But I am going to show you this first one with the purple so that you can see how I have done it. So get everything else out of the way. I just want this purple one here. I want it to be connected on this part here. All I'm going to do is I'm going to split those 3 strings. So I've got 2 strings on one side and 1 string on the other side. Pull them through. I am just tying a double knot. Tying a double knot, looking at it, make sure I like the amount, sort of the placement and the amount of tightness that there is with that. Now I'm going to tie the other half of the double knot so that that is securely in place. And then I'm going to do, holding all 3 strands together, I am going to do another another overhand knot like you would tie your shoes. And I'm going to push this one right up so that it sets very firmly against the frame there, so that it pushes right up and nests right there to create that nice even look. And then you can trim for the roots. If you want to trim them early, kind of as you tie them, trim and maybe leave them 2 inches long, and then know that when you're completely finished, you'll go back and trim them shorter than that, unless you decide you really like the longer root. So I would do the rest of the trees before you secure these, because some of these roots are going to go and be intertwined in here, but that gives you the basic idea of what we're doing. The last step, when you're finished with your piece and ready to create the finished looking hanger that you can hang it by, I like the look of something that's just a little bit thicker, more stable, and just looks a little bit more finished than just a strand of yarn. What I like to do to create that is to take a loose piece of yarn, of the same yarn you've been working with all along, to thread that through and tie it. This just gives me one more layer of certainty that this is nice and secure. So give that a double knot, and I like to leave a 3 or 4 inch tail on that and have the longer end on the other side. That tail we can pass towards the back because we're going to use that to secure the loop at the other end. But now we have 3 strings here. We're just going to braid those 3 strings. And so I will move this, braiding exactly the way that you would braid if you were braiding hair. Just a very basic 3-strand braid. Try to keep the tension even, just so that your braid looks neat and tidy. So you pass the strand from the right side into the middle, the strand from the left side into the middle, and you're just repeating to create that braided look. You need to untangle the yarns at the bottom sometimes. Right to the center, left to the center. You're going to do this until either you've run out of tails of yarn or your loop for the hanger is the length that you would like that loop to be. I personally prefer them to be fairly small so they will fit easily over a hook or a nail, or however you choose to hang it, but not so long that the length of the hanger sort of dwarfs the size of the piece. But this depends completely on what you're going to use it for and where you're going to hang it, and what you like the look of. So once you have the length that you like, so once you've got that loop the length that you like it, I just do an overhand knot at the base of that braid, and then I secure the end of that braid with that 3 or 4 inch tail that we left there. So you can do just a regular double knot again. Just make sure that you've got the base of that knot caught in there. So I like to make sure that the overhand knot that I put at the end that creates a little bit more bulk, I like to make sure that the knot is above that so that can't pull through, because that thicker part of the knot is stopping that coming through. And then just secure it with a double knot there. And you kind of have to coax it down over that larger knot that you've got and pull that tight. And then you can trim those. I like to trim, if I'm trimming ends, I like to trim everything longer than I think I need it, and then figure out the best way once it's all finished. The best way that I like to hide those ends. If I want to wrap them around this way again, if I want to trim them very short, kind of have the whole thing done and see how I best like to deal with the longer tails. To me, I would always rather have a tail that's 2 inches long than a tail that's a ½ inch long. It just gives me more options for when I'm finished. So that is all of the steps that you need to create your tree ornament. I think these are a lot of fun. I think there are a lot of ways you can use these for decorations or as gifts. And I hope you choose to use up some of the ends of your favorite balls of sock yarn to create things like this.